From the time of our arrival in Aotearoa, Māori have created a unique architectural history. Our structures not only house people, but also our dreams, our fundamental needs, and our histories. So what can we tell about ourselves from these buildings? What do they say to us? It's a question I've asked myself constantly. I'm Ro Hoskins, and as a director of an architectural practice, understanding the stories held within the walls of our buildings has been a lifelong obsession. In this series, we're going to take you on a journey to explore not just our architectural structures, but also the social and cultural histories from which our buildings arise. We'll ask, what is Māori architecture? And celebrate some of our most stunning buildings.
This is Whangaruru, the area where some of my tupuna settled around 1,000 years ago.
Arriving in a new and cooler land, our ancestors had to start from scratch. They had to be the architects, the builders and the planners, and innovate to deal with new materials and climatic challenges. The first structures grew out of the need to cook and preserve food and provide shelter.
With ready access to resources of both the sea and the forest, the harbour supported thousands of people. Later on, headlands were carved and shaped to provide better defensive bases as competition for lands and fisheries became more intense around the 16th century. Fortified pātū watuwatu were often enormous engineering feats requiring literally thousands of tons of earth to be moved and shaped just with wooden implements. He was standing in an excavated trench, and you can imagine with a palisade on each side presents a pretty formidable obstacle for any would-be attacker.
The earliest kainga were established on the coast, close to readily accessible food sources, particularly kaimoana. The architecture that resulted from these living bases was initially pretty simple, as a means of tempering the elements.
Here the coastal bases were maintained as summer encampments to harvest kaimoana and to maintain ahika. Later on, hapu began to move inland to more sheltered areas where other food sources were available. This is generally where gardens were created and more permanent kainga established.
By the time of European arrival, a recognisable Māori architecture, as distinct from Polynesia, was well established. European influences had a profound effect on the traditional Māori communal way of life. Around the country, iwi responded differently to the forces of colonialism, and while many held on to the concept of a communal village or papakainga, it took many forms. Early in the 20th century, deep in the heart of the Urewera forest, a radically different kainga emerged. The prophet Ruakenana founded a community and religious movement based on the principles of pacifism, communal ownership of property, and his own unique take on the Christianity of the Pākehā, identifying himself as the brother of Jesus. In the heart of the Urewera, a village was created that was home to an estimated 600 of Rua's followers. The spiritual and political dimensions of the village saw the building of one of the most iconic and celebrated structures in the history of Māori architecture. Hiona was the heart of Rua's village. It was where the many laws of the village were created. Hiona was a unique architectural taonga and represented the struggle to overcome the challenges Tūhoe were facing as a people. It's thought by some that the design was inspired by Solomon's temple from the Bible and lithographs of the Dome on the Rock in Jerusalem. Despite being a 6-hour walk through dense bush from the nearest road, the prophet and his community of followers did not go unnoticed in the heart of the Urewera forest. Considered to be a troublemaker by government officials, 70 armed constabulary was sent to arrest the pacifist leader. Arrested and tried for sedition, he was found not guilty. He was, however, sentenced to 1 year hard labour for resisting arrest. Like Te Koti before him, Rua appropriated biblical symbols and colonial materials to build hiona. The repeating sequence of yellow diamonds and blue clubs were thought to represent the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, and the remaining fourth line signifying the one who is yet to come.
When hiona was built, it was built for a purpose. They palisaded it and it became the pātapu. Hiona, the Zion itself, Hiru Haramaho, they were all in one. Governance and biblical side of things was all set there. It was not settled by the chairman. It had to be taken right up to what they called the timuaki, the makarini at the time.
Tragically, hiona and most of the village have disappeared. All that remains of hiona is a handful of old photographs and the stories of a time when a once remarkable village rose deep in the shadows of this great forest. But it seems that could change. The descendants of Rua Kenana have a dream to rebuild hiona one day.
As a hapu, we decided to try and find another structure. I actually went back home and found some papers that my father had. It was actually how it was in 1910, 1906 onwards. And John happened to be here at the time. Well, blow me down. He went back a month later. He came back and had these plans of how to put it in. It was just 1 month.
The inspiration to rebuild hiona came from a prophecy of Rua Kenana.
The saying was that one day, mā te tamaiti tika, hai huke te umutaroa. My father had told me, if we ever rebuild, don't leave it just for the eye to see. In other words, just for tourism. The roundhouse, a hiona. Use it, not for the eye to see only.
The place where hiona once stood is now covered in trees and grass. But the people here hope that one of the great buildings from our past will rise again, fulfilling Rua's prophecy that all of the descendants of the mountain will one day return.
It is just a spiritual place for us to look at the mountain, everything to us. We're it. It doesn't belong to us, we belong to it.
One of the closest surviving examples of a traditional village or papakainga can be seen at Whakarewarewa in Rotorua. Whakarewarewa was established in an area of incredible natural resources. The geothermal activity of the region provided a convenient and limitless source of energy for all kinds of purposes, including cooking a delicious evening meal. Mainly due to tourism, Whakarewarewa as a village has survived relatively unchanged to this day. The people of Whakarewarewa have been hosting visitors and guiding them through their village since the 1800s. The home of one of the most famous guides, Maggie Papakura, still stands in the village and is lived in to this day. So Maggie really put the village on the map in her time?
Yes, she did. She did. It's something that she wanted to do as well because she thought it was going to bring fruitful benefits, if you like, back to the village and her village people. She was quite visionary for her, for at that time, because tourism was only just developing and taking off. And she thought that her geothermal region, that tourist would absolutely love, to be a part of and to see what she was talking about and what she was basically marketing. But she was such a beautiful woman and regal, and her homestead up here is something that she just loved dearly.
So it's one of the older whare on the village?
In the village, yes it is. Even though over the years it has had different exterior cladding and the concrete steps added, you can see, which is quite sad, what the geothermal does to the more modern cladding as well.
Many locals live in the same houses their whānau have lived in for generations. And in many ways, the communal nature of life in this small village has also changed little.
It's just been a part of their lives, go to the hot pool and get their hot water to wash up, and go to the communal baths that we all share. And, you know, that's been their way of life. So
you've got such a resource there, you know, it's actually very economical to live in the village, I suppose. It is indeed. And I guess for us it's about sustainability, and we've always appreciated our environment. So this is an example of the local change, well, the changes in our environment and what we live with. When the ground has had enough, it just opens, and so this is a new feature for us in the middle of our marae ātea. Complements it, actually. It does, I think so.
Pa were about exclusion, keeping aggressors out. But the design of the village itself was about inclusion, living in a shared and communal way. In whakarewarewa, the idea of building fences between you and your neighbour was unthought of and unthinkable. People bathed together, people cooked together, people worshipped together. This beautiful Catholic church has stood here in the village for over 100 years.
This is the Catholic church, and at the other end of the village is the Anglican church. So growing up in the village was always the Catholics and the Anglicans. But the good thing about being quite separate as far as religion goes, at Christmas we come together in the main wharenui in Whare and have a combined service at midnight. It's lovely. So there's no prohibition on Catholic Anglican marriages? No, not at all. Hey, not in Māoridom has there ever been a, you know, barriers for anything, no. The villagers are used to a lot of changes in the I guess what the volcanic activity's doing. Oh, yeah, they certainly are, in that the environment has changed, you know, generation after generation. Because you live in the village, you grow up in the village, you make a new footpath, you walk around it. Even what you see here now for us as children growing up, this homestead here, Auntie Gugu's, the modern materials have not lasted nearly as long as the original homestead that stood there with the native timbers and so on. So it's sad in a way, but you know, once again, it's the environment that causes the decay, and the village people, the families that affects, will just work around it. Well, you can't argue with it. No, not at all.
The natural resource that's been so kind to this village has also caused ongoing problems for the buildings. This house has been condemned and will be torn down in the near future. But while many buildings have fallen victim to the forces of nature, the village itself has survived, and its traditions. Like the famous local sport that gave the Te Arawa iwi the affectionate nickname of penny divers.
And of course the kids haven't changed?
Oh, not at all. The Waka penny divers will always be the same. They love what they do, and they, you know, they can make $100 a day if the tourist numbers are here. You see the older ones standing on the bridge now that used to do it, you know, and now they're watching their children do it, and so no, that will never change. We'll always have Waka penny divers, just as we have Waka blondes.
So what were you like as a diver?
I wasn't never really that good at it, I'm afraid to say. I used to be one of the quiet ones over in the back there and look very sad so that people would feel sorry for me and throw it into my hands.
Few communities have survived in the way that whakarewarewa has. For most, this sense of village life has all but disappeared, a distant memory. And with this type of village life gone, the question is, what has taken its place?
Drawing inspiration from communities like whakarewarewa is a very contemporary papa kainga in urban Wellington's Island Bay.
We stood back, hands on hips. 7 years, that's a man's leg, and I'll do it on my f***ing head with ease, buddies. He punched the card and roared with ease. His eyes were blue on white and bright, bigger than any eyes I'd seen for a long time. Everyone started to look up to him, because he made you feel good. He looked so big, he was big. Two looked at me with a knowing kind of nod. Too loud, he whispered. A bit too loud.
Bruce Stewart is a great writer, but this story is not fiction. Bruce knows prison life. He spent 2 years in 4 different prisons around the country.
In jail, I read an article in Te Ao Ho, a Māori magazine at the time, and it was written by Cliff Whiting. The marae is my home. The marae is my place of work. It's my museum. It's my kindergarten right through to my university. It's my church. It's where I was born and where I'll be buried. And I thought, that's it.
When he was released in 1974, Bruce made a decision. Prison would never again be his home. Instead, Bruce decided to build a new home for himself and people in the same position.
I only had $25. We ended up here at this place. We started in '74 and we had no idea how to start.
For Bruce, this is his kainga in a literal sense. This is where he raised his family and where they still live. But it's also a kainga in a much wider sense.
Bruce's goal was to create an environment based on Māori principles for disconnected urban Māori.
Some of the young ones, they built this place, but it built them. I read a book, it was called Architecture Without Architects. And it was lots of places that were just come out of the ground, very poor people, gathering the stuff from around them. Sometimes bamboo, they tied it together like that, or it was rocks on the side, so they used the rocks. Whatever mud was available, whatever was available, they made a shelter. Our biggest job was excavating. With old building there, it was a steep site, so we had to create flats, and there's one part there, we got 17 retaining walls, and we did huge excavation, up to 2,000 cubic metres with pick and shovel. It's taken nearly 40 years, and we're still going, you know. I don't think you're ever finished.
Taputeranga is 26.5 metres high, covers 10 levels, and is 27,000 square feet in area. It's the tallest wooden house built from recycled materials on wooden piles anywhere on Earth.
There's a kind of poetry in the way that Bruce has used entirely recycled materials to build his kainga. When he came out of prison, he was determined to reinvent himself, and he's done the same things with the materials he's used to build this great whare.
I rang up Todd Motors. I saw the car cases were made from Quila. Articulator loads every day went to the tip. And I found that a big crime, that they could cut down these trees and use them once to pack the cars in and then take them to the tip. So the whole place, and when you look at it, it's set out on a module of car cases. The car case is wide, and so all the structure goes a module of car cases.
So Bruce, the design of this whole complex, where did that come from?
It just grew, and then I like the idea of the meeting house with a heavy top, strong on the head. And the big problem with that is that once you put more structure on top, you had to strengthen. We have 9 whares and counting, you know, so that's exciting, eh?
The construction of this particular whare here, where did that come from?
One of my sons, when he's 17, he did all the whakairo in there. It starts over there as a little baby girl in the womb. It's the story of my mother, right through to Te Pua way, to reach the full potential.
Yeah.
This is the whare that the family uses. This is where we have our when we bring a tūpapaku, we come here. It's Pare Waka, all the whares are named after my mum. Yeah, when my little girl calls them, she says, haere mai ki te kōpū o tōku kuia. Welcome to the womb of my grandmother. And this place is my mum. It's a place for our family, but we share that with everyone. We're not like we're the owners, we're the caretakers. And we want them to have a good time here, feel comfortable and not threatened. The mark of a marae is how well you look after people. So it's taken from 1974 until now, and it's never finished. Once you've finished, it's downhill, I reckon.
Taputiranga is an embodiment of Bruce Stewart's mother. And this whare, Ukaipo, is built to honour women.
The whare was built because of the debates and the controversy of the whole woman sitting at the back in the pōwhiri. And so we just wanted to build a whare that kind of revolves around female energy and empowers them, to show that in our culture that's not the case and they're very tapu. So we have groups come here, and especially females like Ministry of Women's Affairs and groups like that find this whare they have a connection with, and so they choose to be in here.
So the artwork?
Yeah, they're done by women because of the reason of the whare, and it seems right. So the 2 artists are Robin Kokio and Diane Prince.
Bruce's daughter Pare was born and raised in Taputiranga and lives here to this day.
So this marae is really your life?
Yeah. I grew up with my dad and his dreams and all of his stories, and kind of fell in love with it and the whole idea and the whole place.
So as a child growing up here, it must have been like an enormous playground.
I kind of met a whole bunch of different people that other kids didn't really get to meet. I've never really wanted to travel because kind of international groups in the world come here. So I get to meet them at home. So it's different, but it's really good. This here is Donna, and upstairs is Whetu, and they're level 8 and 9. And they're named after kind of the moon and the stars because they're high, very high.
And it's got some essential structural support going on here.
Yeah. Cheap and easy way to do things.
I think it's great that the engineers were satisfied with that solution.
Yeah, they just thought it up and did it, and it worked. The tree hut, because it's the tree hut, used to be my favourite as a kid because we used to play, you know, a whole bunch of games and stuff. Then it became the honeymoon suite, so kind of turned me off a bit. And now that I'm older, I've learnt much more about Ukaipo and how that connects with me.
So that's now your
favourite.
I feel a lot of our maraes, I go past them, no one lives there, and they look very lonely. I just think living in communities, you can be much stronger. I love this place. I love the birds and I love the people coming, and I can hear all the kata next door, the laughing in the kitchen and all the good fun and the people. I don't only believe it's a good way for Māoris to live, I think it's a good way for everyone to live.
We may not all live in villages today, but the wairua of the village echoes on in the way we live our lives, the way we build our kainga, and in particular, the way we build our marae. We'll see these influences again and again in our journey through Māori architecture.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.